being 6:06 on January 9th, I will call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. And again, I apologize for getting a late start. We had some technical difficulties. I am going to start with the town administrator's report.
Thank you. We've got a lot of items on the report this week. The first item is solid waste and recycling services contract pricing update. The board may recall that we had checked in with 7 major solid waste handlers when we were anticipating the end of the contract with Covanta, which is the current solid waste contract, at the end of calendar year 22. However, Covanta decided that they wanted to offer the town a 6-month extension. So we kind of put that aside, waited for that extension to be put in place, which started on January 1st, at a higher tipping rate because we knew that was going to go up. And we reached out again to all the major contractors. We still only ended up with 2 contractors that are interested. I think it's because of the town's relatively small trash throughput. And those were Casella and Commonwealth Hauling. By far, Commonwealth, which is not an all-inclusive contract, Casella was, you pay a particular fee and you get a transfer station managed, you get the trash hauled away, the tipping fee included, and they were even offering recycling management and hauling. But if you compare those prices to using Commonwealth, which is the current solid waste hauler that Covanta uses, but they're willing to continue serving the town separately. Under that construct, Covanta would continue to receive the town's solid waste, but that's all we would be doing with Covanta. Covanta at one point was all-inclusive, and then they stepped down for this 6-month extension to where they're providing the disposal and the hauling via Commonwealth. But under the new arrangement, it would be Covanta, you'd pay them a particular fee, $93.60 per ton, plus the consumer price index starting July 1st. You would pay Commonwealth a particular fee per haul to get the waste to Covanta. You would continue to pay Dynamic Waste Company or Dynamic Hauling to handle our recycling, and Commonwealth could also manage the transfer station if that's what is desired. But no matter what, the option involving Commonwealth and the other partners is far cheaper than what Casella put on the table. If you then look at potentially using the Commonwealth model with several partners, since Commonwealth hauls dumpsters that are incorporated as a trailer, and they don't haul breakaway containers on a breakaway style compactor, which we don't have right now. Since the town needs to replace its compactor, under this model, you would replace it with the same type of compactor, which would be another trailer-style compactor. So the pieces are starting to fall into place, and it really comes down to whether you want just the hauling or the hauling and the management of the station. If you don't elect management of the station from Commonwealth, you could continue to use DPW labor or even bring on part-time DPW labor to manage the station. We would still need our full-time employees with certain licenses to compact the trash and things like that. But as far as watching waste come to the station and be deposited in the hopper, if you will, that could be done by anybody. And the key thing is, if we just stay with town full-time labor and there's a snowstorm or someone's out sick, it's difficult to make sure that we are watching everything. It's hard to backfill quickly. If we went with Commonwealth, they would guarantee a labor force, somebody would always show up. But if we looked at perhaps part-time DPW employees, which we already have a job title for, that would be much more cost-effective than having even Commonwealth do the work. So with that, I can get more into detail if you need it, but that's the general outline.
And I mean, it sounds like the goal would be for the Board of Selectmen to make a recommendation this evening to the Department of
I
Public
think
Works so we
yeah.
can move
We
forward.
keep moving and then buy what we need and get things in place.
Did you have any questions, Selectman Bradford?
Is there any sense of what the cost differential would be between the Commonwealth and the do-it?
Yeah, it would be considerably
No,
cheaper.
not Commonwealth and
Casella. You mean,
Commonwealth
and
Town
the
employees.
town
Right,
labor,
right.
considerably cheaper, especially if you went to part-time.
Yeah, so a laborer is $20.50 an hour at 40 hours a week. It's $820 a week. 52 weeks is $42,640 plus health insurance and a pension. With Commonwealth managing the station, it would be $14.50 per week for roughly 26 to 28 hours, which essentially comes out to somewhere between $51 and $55 an hour, which translates to about $107,000 to $115,000 a year. So we could, in theory, have 2 full-time employees plus some part-timers for what they're willing, what they're looking for. So we're talking about a $42,000 full-time employee that also gives the DPW 2 additional days of labor above and beyond the hours needed at the transfer station.
Right,
So-
and if you went with several part-time
Several
employees
part-time
that
employees.
rotated in or could backfill each other if someone was sick or a vacation or whatever, it's even less than that.
It's even less. So the pay scale for a part-time laborer employee is the scale was somewhere between $15 and $19 an hour, and you could, in essence, hire many, 3 or 4 that could rotate in and out. They could. I was kind of thinking of it as potentially like almost like a mini tax work-off program where we could hire some seniors that would be willing to work at the transfer station and be diligent about watching what was going in, but at a much cheaper rate. So I think we have options, but at this point, I think we need to focus on some of the big,
Right, and I would say, I mean, we've been looking at this one piece at a time. If the board is at least in agreement that we would be staying with Commonwealth, whether they manage the station or they just haul the trash, then we need to start looking toward replacement of the compactor with a like
So
piece of
that's
equipment.
regardless of whether we do the Commonwealth, full Commonwealth, or the
Because they're still going,
Commonwealth and-
under either option, they're
Got it.
going to haul the trash.
Got it. So all we're proposing now is we're sort of doing away with the Casella option and saying,
Yeah, I don't think it's,
we're going to do a Commonwealth option, but we may internalize some of it. Is that
right, I don't
is
think
that
you have to
accurate?
decide here and now, but you might want to talk about not just having Commonwealth haul and not provide any labor for management of the station. Then you would decide internally later, do you do with full-time labor or do you do it with some kind of part-time labor?
Yeah, yeah.
So I would make a motion for the selectmen to recommend to the Board of Public Works that we hire Commonwealth Hauling to provide solid waste hauling to Covanta as of July 1st, 2023, along with the purchase of new trailer-style compactor to replace the existing unit. So we would replace it almost in kind with a new model.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, I'll pass that along. The sale of town-owned lots on Gregory Island, when the board last took a look at this, 2 things. I had mentioned that it was important to go back and find all the deeds for these parcels. And the assessor's clerk did a great job of actually digging that stuff up and found a deed that actually describes each parcel for all but 3 of the parcels. With respect to those 3, she even made calls to the Registry of Deeds, and they said that's going to take some more research. So how much you want to pay to sell those 3 lots, I'm not sure you want to pay anything to sell those 3, because you're not going to make a lot of money. But as to the lots that are, that we have a descriptive deed for, I know the chairman was going to do some more research as well on perhaps setting what the floor should be for the sale of any of these lots?
So I have been working actually with Ryan Magical of the Economic Development Committee, who did a lot of the upfront work on the Gregory Island Road parcels. And in some of the work he's done, the recommendation is, well, I guess the first question is, do we know what the last date of assessment was for these parcels?
Since they're town-owned, it's not likely that it was given a lot of attention.
So the recommendation next would be, they feel that you wouldn't want to consider selling a parcel of land that hadn't been assessed within the last 5 years. So I think what we should do is see if we can bubble this to the top of the assessor's list of getting these reassessed, and then bring this back for further discussion.
Sure, we can do that. Does that make sense?
Sure.
All right. The next item is the planning board had put together a list of recommendations with respect to the Apple Street project design. And that had been reviewed by our engineering firm, and now they've come with a draft response, which the board should go over. I guess one big question is whether or not the board would like to entertain having an arborist and a landscape architect brought onto the project to help advise the engineering company. That's certainly something that's possible, and it may even be possible with in-town resources. We have someone who runs a large tree service who's an arborist who might volunteer his time, and we also have the town planner being a landscape architect. So that might be a way to address that and get that type of input into the project.
We also have Kim Drake, who might be willing to volunteer time since she stepped down from
That's
the
right.
planning board.
Yeah?
I think if we can do something, I don't think the town should go out and engage in a formal way an arborist to come in. If we can do something that works from the, internally or with help from local people, I think that's fine. But
Sure, and then at least you're addressing that in the project. One other idea, and I don't think it says it in the draft response, I would like to see what our engineering firm has to say about if there were going to be a deviation from the width of the road, because that's something that is brought up in the planning board's concerns and the concerns of others as well. And that deviation comes off of whatever the regular standard is, and then something happens later on, who's on the hook for that? Because somebody could say, well, the road's narrower, but it should have never been built that way. Then there's an accident in that area, and somehow we went and utilized the standard that was not meeting the industry recommendations, which is why our engineering firm is recommending it. So I think that might be an important piece to work into the memo as well. Did the board have any other questions or concerns about the draft memo, so we can get it finalized and out?
I do have one.
Okay.
In the road width question, where they say about, I'm on page 2 of this letter. And the first bullet, about two-thirds down, which said, typically on state or federally funded projects, a much wider roadway footprint is required to provide bicycle and pedestrian accommodation, improve safety. We are providing new construction and will need to follow these design standards as such. Are they saying that when they say, and we need to follow, is that by law or
I think it speaks to their level of comfort as engineers who have professional licenses. And I think I could ask about that, and I think it works into what I had brought up just a second ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I just want to make sure that to the degree we possibly can, that we accommodate and try to work with the various interests here, and not simply say, by definition, and unless it is by definition, unless that is the rule and we're bound by the rule, or we're bound because of the various grants that we're receiving, that we're required to do this. I just don't want us, feel that we're being, all these concerns are being shut off just,
So we did get in touch with people at the federal government level and at the state government level, and they both basically turned around and said, it's a local decision.
It's your decision.
So now the big question is...
So now it is our decision.
Right.
So what can we do within, and I get it, we don't want to put ourselves at risk.
Well, will the engineer stamp that plan? That's the question. I don't know, but I can ask that in a more detailed sense.
I think I'd like to. I just wasn't sure of how that wording, what the wording meant when they said we need to. It doesn't, that isn't 100% clear to me.
There's also, if you noticed in there, there's a discussion about having the bridge at a certain width, and then if you change the width, feeding the guardrail in at an accepted crash rating or something like that.
Yeah. Are you talking about the whole thing where they say, well, we'll have the guardrail, then we'll stop the guardrail and have a tree, and then we'll continue the guardrail?
It's, let me tell you.
If I can have everybody that's joining us online mute your phone, that would be great. Thank you.
It's got to be on this page here.
So you're not talking about this part where they're talking about discontinuing the guardrail at existing trees as suggested? This part
Right there,
here.
yeah.
That certainly doesn't make sense to me.
Right, deflect vehicles, each time a new segment. I thought they said something as well about if you had a 20-foot wide bridge and an 18-foot wide road, now you have a transition. Well, I'll look into that, but I think if they're not willing to stamp it at 18 feet, you're not going to have, we need stamped drawings.
Well, right, but I think it gets into a question of liability, of potential liability is what it is.
That's exactly why they would...
It's our decision, it's not their decision, it's not any of the federal or state agencies.
Unless as professional engineers, they won't stamp something that goes lower than the recommended industry standard.
Right.
So I'll find out,
Right.
and you'll have your answer to it. Anything else on that?
I had no questions.
The next thing is the Centennial Grove Cottage. We had an educational organization indicate that they would like to potentially lease the Grove Cottage on a long-term basis. This organization has recently been displaced from the facility or headquarters where they were not too long ago. The Economic Development Committee has been looking at a way to utilize the Grove Cottage to bring in more revenue to the town, like Tux Point brings in revenue to town of Manchester. But it's not out of the question that instead of doing it on a rental by rental basis, that you could get an organization to come in, fix up the premises as part of the deal, and then pay some kind of modest amount of rent, as well as making sure that there's public access through the improved facility beyond that. So that'd be another way to look at it. If the board has interest in exploring it further, though, in order to do a lease, which is really the only durable way for an organization to rely on the use of a particular property, that would have to go to town meeting. So you'd first have to find out from town meeting. Now, you could survey interested parties even before town meeting votes and says, we've done a request for proposals, and we already know who we would choose, and this is what the benefit would be. And you certainly can do that.
Brendan, explain to me the difference between a lease and a non-exclusive license, because you make a reference to
Yep.
that in
So
your exchange with them.
a lease means that the town meeting has decided that a particular third party will get an exclusive use of whatever's being leased. Unless the lease also says something like, and public access will be afforded here and there or whatever.
Right.
A license is, first of all, non-exclusive and it's revocable.
Right.
So somebody that's going to come in, maybe make substantial improvements to the property and wants to then put down roots and have the organization exist there for a while, is not really going to do that on a license. They could, but it would be quite a risk for the organization.
Well, so in the exchange of emails, when you put that out, you say the only way to allow you in sooner would involve a non-exclusive license. Her response is, that sounds workable. The select
And
board is
I think
interested,
an-
I will check with my board.
Right, I think meaning though, in the context, meaning until, like in other words,
Right.
we would jump at the chance, and, because I did also
Up to the
say,
time of the town meeting.
I said, yeah, you could do that, but then you might
I get
not
it.
get the lease.
Right.
So they would risk it.
Yeah, for that period.
Yeah, and then if they put like for instance, if they're gonna move in now, which is what they'd love
They
to
have to
do,
make some of
they have to put in a heating system.
Yeah.
They have to put in a well. There's no water, there's no heat.
Yeah, no, although they,
Septic system too.
well, they said porta potties and stuff.
We have to determine with the Board of Health whether that's even, and the plumbing code, since it's a place of employment.
So I don't wanna, have the only, I don't, Ruth, how did, I personally feel from, I don't know these folks, but from what I've read from the various, there's lots of input here who find these people very reputable and very good organizations, so I'd like to try to do whatever we can to see if we can work something out that gives them an opportunity here, but that's my feeling.
I guess I'm slightly conflicted. I feel like the Economic Development Committee has just recently, well, over the past several months, been putting forth a big effort to do upgrades at Centennial Grove. We've been to town meeting, we've got money put aside to start working on that. We have a volunteer group that's rebuilding the pavilion. So the goal was to start renting it out for some income to bring back to the town. When you read this email exchange, some of the upgrades would be really nice. We've been wanting to do that for a long time, but the rental rate seems, limited, like they have limited funds.
So help me out, this is the cottage.
This is the cottage, the Grove House. This isn't where Camp Dory is.
Right.
This is the house, but how much would it tie? People still rent that. That's where we have Ales for ALS. People rent that space. We've had other groups want to do cooking classes. I guess my issue is, even if they were just to do a license to try to get to town meeting to do a lease, there's no guarantee that they're going to get it.
Right.
So
No, I agree with that.
I guess I would rather have Economic Development Committee weigh in on this before we would be willing to entertain it further.
Right, no, I wouldn't do it without their input, but I don't see a reason to say we don't want to do it.
We do also have Jessica Cagle on the line with us, and if we want to give her an opportunity, she might be able to answer questions or just give us a little bit of information about Kestrel Educational Adventures, just to give us a little bit more information about her program.
They're just realizing, again, that it is should not be construed by anyone as any type of agreement between the town and Kestrel, because again, there's a town meeting piece and there's a competitive piece with respect to making a proposal that other organizations could also partake in.
Right. Jessica, I see that you're on the line with us. I do have a 6:30 appointment, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to have the board have you introduce yourself, see if either of us have any questions, and then I am going to move on to a 6:30 appointment. So if you'd like to join us, just unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, thank you so much for allowing me to patch in. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jessica Cagle. I'm the founder of Kestrel and the program director. And Kestrel has been running ecology, wildlife ecology, and forest education programs in Chabaca Woods and in the general area of Chabaca Lake for over 15 years. We work with the Essex Public Schools as well as Manchester and at least 8 of the other surrounding towns. And we teach in-depth projects to children all throughout the region of Cape Ann and the North Shore at various sites. With a home base, we also be able to offer a lot of home-based programs. And these are ongoing in-depth ecology projects where kids do wildlife monitoring and water monitoring, wildlife mapping, rare species raising for rehabilitation, as well as just rare species documentation. We also run outdoor skills programs, and we just love Centennial Grove. It's one of my absolute favorite places in Essex County. So we would just really be grateful for any opportunity to have the possibility of renting and running programming on the site. And I do want to add that we're really flexible. So if we were to make the upgrades and to rent, we don't need completely exclusive use. If there needed to be occasional events inside the cottage, we're completely okay with that.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Do you have any questions?
If anyone has any other questions for me, I'll be here.
No, not at this point.
Thank you. Let me just see when the Economic Development Committee meets. Jody, I think you're on the line with us. I don't have the date in my phone. When do you meet again?
I think it's the 19th.
Is it possible to ask you to put an agenda item on there to talk about the Grove potential for Grove rental?
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll bring this back after the EDC meets. Mr. Soulard, would you like to join us? You can come to the table. We have an extra microphone for you.
Would you like me to give a little background before we go into the?
Sure.
Okay, so, as people may be aware, we have regular meetings involving personnel from the district, from the town of Manchester, and from the town of Essex. We call that the collaboration group, and we work together to try to forecast what's coming on the 3 different budget fronts. This year, the district is working really hard to try to get away from the use of district reserve money to help keep the cost of town apportionments down because they have other uses for that funding. And this year in particular, there's some capital needs that need to be attended to, and that use of one-time reserves could be managing some one-time projects. What that does, though, is it throws the apportionments up higher because for several years in a row now, the district has used reserves which have helped keep the town apportionments down. And in the case of Essex, when you look at the percentage increase that comes to the town, since we're on the higher end of the formula right now, based on student population, we're looking at an 8.6% increase over last year. And so the question has come, if the district is saying that reserves are not going to be used in succeeding years as well, the town would have to get over that hurdle somehow. We might be able to cobble together using the town's reserves and using untapped levy capacity and some other things, we might be able to get over that hurdle in year one, but that hurdle doesn't go away because it becomes the new base budget for the district. And the question becomes, if that's something that's going to be a permanent fixture and we're not going to see reserves used by the district in the future because they're trying to get away from that practice, how does the town fund that on an ongoing basis beyond just the 1 year? Especially since we're expecting probably 5% plus increases beyond that, again, because the town is on the higher end of the apportionment scale at this point in time. So I know that we had a meeting at Collaboration, and then we brought that back, Selectman Bradford and I brought that back to discuss with the chairman of the Finance Committee and the town accountant. And I know Selectman Bradford has kind of a few things to lay out for the board to consider.
Right. So one of the things I've grappled with a little. So we in the interim we did reach out to the administration and try to get from them a clearer idea of exactly what their projections were, not simply in this coming year, but in the following year, so that we could try to schedule out a projection of what it would mean if we were to want to do a one-time override in order to give ourselves the resources to deal with this gap that is going to be there for each of the coming 4 or 5 years, especially given the fact that we're on a negative side of a enrollment trend that makes the portion of input greater from our town than from Manchester. And so I did reach out to the administration and asked if they would provide that, and they came back and said that until they had reviewed that with the committee and had determined that they were working on such a projection, but until that they had reviewed that with the committee and come to a consensus and an agreement from the committee, that they weren't really ready to share that, which we certainly get. So we did a little bit of projecting on our own based on some sort of hopefully vanilla projections of what's going to occur over the following 5 years. But we really can't say with confidence what that would mean in terms of a single override to cover the coming 5 years at this point in time, until we do get those projections from the district. So we're not really ready, I don't think, to propose a point of view, a specific point of view, so far as the town, so far as the Board of Selectmen. And I can't speak for the Finance Committee, but so far as the Board of Selectmen is concerned, of our position as to whether we want to have a multi-year override process put in place for this year. I will say I also reached out to the administration to try to get a better understanding. They were very, very helpful, and they provided information to me about some of the questions that seem to bubble up all the time with respect to parts of the budget. The student-teacher ratio, class size, the special education process and program that the district has, and they were extremely helpful, and I got a lot of information from them. As an aside, I would say I'm really convinced, given what I've seen, that our special education program is really, really beneficial to us. It's an efficient way of dealing with the special education needs within the district when we can, when they're when we can bring them that process into the school, that it pays us to do that without even considering the benefit it provides to the students who are served. So I'm really comfortable with that, and I'd be prepared to have a discussion with anybody about that. With respect to the student-teacher ratio, the class size, I still do have some questions. Some of the information that was provided, I couldn't really tie it down. It seemed that based on which set of facts you were looking at, you were getting a slightly different view of where we stand. I will say I've got a much better understanding now of this whole concept of that class size can't simply be determined by school population, that there is a large portion of it, especially within the lower and the middle school, that is determined by the standards that you want to establish for a minimum and maximum class size. And you can't simply say, if you lose 5% of your school population, you can cut your faculty by 5%. It doesn't work that way. It's a step process, and I'm very comfortable with that. There are some questions, though, that I still have, and I'm reaching out to the administration to try to get a better understanding of some of the other facts that they presented to me as to the actual student-teacher ratio as compared to the average class size. So, again, I think it's something that we need to, continue to look at. Jeff, do you want to say anything?
I mean, I just kind of echo what Guy said about sort of the timing. I think the school committee is set to meet tomorrow and talk a little bit more about their budget. And until we have some clarity around what the next 4 or 5 years looks like for Essex, we can't really come up with a plan for, where we just try to address 1 year now and then the out years are easier to manage, or are we looking at a plan to now, build in, moving towards an override and build in, an override that will carry us for 4 or 5 years. We still need to look into mechanically how that works. Essex does not have a big history of operational overrides. I think the last one we did is maybe 2005, and I certainly don't think we've done one that would be this kind of undertaking where we're looking at, projecting out 5 years to see where we need to be and building in all those costs, to do one override up front. So I still think, we'll get some of that clarity from the school, and then we'll, everybody will put their heads together and try to figure out a way, to make things work on our side. And then our budgets, our departmental budgets are due to my office tomorrow, and then we begin to assemble, the town side of the budget, which is a whole, it's the other half of the budget, and what does that look like, and how does that, how does that roll into any potential need for, overrides or things like that, just, for town needs. I know I've heard from several, departments that are looking for, potentially personnel, increases to wages and things like that. And, some of them have fairly compelling cases for why maybe there should be some increases, but those would be outside of a 2% COLA, which is what we typically cap at. But I think we have to be mindful of, if we're going to be saying, for one half of the budget, we're going to move forward with an override, it's not really equitable to say to the folks who, are on this side of the line, well, you guys have to figure out a way to live at, 2% or less, but on the other side of the pie, we're going to, be willing to push the envelope a little bit.
So the one other thing I would say, there's been some discussion about this question of the school's capital needs, and whether there's an opportunity to have the towns fund the capital needs. And the benefit to the town of that, as I understand it, is an override for capital purposes is a non-permanent override. It's a single override, and it doesn't affect the tax base going forward. And there might be, if there was a way to shift the benefit that we're providing to the district to a capital project as opposed to an operating project operating funds, it might be a more palatable process on our side.
But the district would necessarily then have to add the reserves back in to help with the apportionment.
Exactly. So that if the reserves are being reserved within the school for the capital projects, if they could reconsider and say, oh, well, if we can satisfy our capital needs through funding from the town, through a capital project, a capital override.
Right.
That might be beneficial to us. Am I way out, or?
No, I mean, this is something I brought up at the budget hearing, and from the town's perspective, the district using their own reserves on operating expenses is a far more palatable thing to the town for two reasons. One, as you mentioned, it allows us to move forward with more capital-based overrides, which are, finite, tied to the life of that capital purchase. And two, it makes the town, it's a lot easier for the town to use our reserves, which, if you think of like our free cash, we try to use our free cash for one-time items. We try not to supplement the operating budget with it, the idea being that you become addicted to the use of that cash, and if that cash goes away, how are you filling that hole? But when you're filling specific capital projects with, it's much like we already operate on the town side of the budget. If we need to buy, some sort of a vehicle or whatever, and we use free cash, it's a one-time use of free cash. That's more in line with the reserves policy that Ginny Antel wrote in the last year or two, and what the DOR would like us to do. What they don't like us to do is throw $400,000 of free cash at an operating budget gap, because you're setting yourself up for the failure of next year. What if you, for whatever reason, don't have an extra $400,000 of free cash? How are you going to fill that hole? So the two parts of the flexibility that work to our advantage from the town side is it makes, if you need to move towards an override, it makes that a much easier, and I shouldn't say easy because they're never easy, but it's a lot less daunting if you're not increasing the tax on the town $400,000, forever. You're just doing it for one time for, to fix a turf field or to fix a very specific thing one time. So certainly from our side, personally, I feel like that is something that provides the town with a tremendous amount of flexibility. Obviously it's the district that has to make that decision, right, if they'd be willing to do it. But I think it's a very interesting way to approach it, because it would offer us flexibility that I think we're going to need come May.
Thank you. Guy, when you mentioned, so I got this email from Brendan with the spreadsheet, when you mentioned reaching out to the administration, is this above and beyond the collaboration meetings? Is the administration that you're referring to just
the collaboration meeting is a meeting. It's not an exchange of information. So we are waiting for their determination of this projection, this multi-year projection. I wouldn't expect to have it handed to me in a collaboration meeting and then react to it.
No,
we're going to have. We'll have to take it in, and then we'll. Is that what you're asking?
I was curious if you had reached out to the school committee requesting information that came back, or if you went directly to Pam.
I've been actually dealing with Avi.
With Avi, okay. That was. I just didn't know if there was any other information.
And Avi's kept the school committee involved and engaged, and everyone knows what's going on.
Okay.
Right.
Perfect. I have no questions. I'll be at the school committee meeting tomorrow night, so we'll hopefully have more information
I just
then.
have a scheduling question. Teresa, when is the school committee going to do the final budget hearing? Isn't it in late January?
Final budget hearing is the final Tuesday in January. It is held at Essex Elementary School. I think it is the 24th.
Okay, see, so the selectmen are meeting not again until the 23rd. You might have to meet in another meeting before that, because how can you might have follow-up questions and the thing is the next night.
Right,
So it's something to think about. We'll keep an eye on that.
okay. We may have more information after tomorrow night's meeting, though.
Right.
Is the expectation, Teresa, that at tomorrow night's meeting, there would be available a multi-year projection?
Tomorrow night's meeting, the agenda that we have posted will be a look at the proposed budget as was presented the last time, but in
Right.
greater detail of the different budget categories broken down. We are hoping to look at some multi-year projections as well. It'll be a little bit time determined, but that is the hope for discussion at the committee level at that point, so that then once we get out to the budget hearing, there will be opportunity to ask lots of questions about that. My hope would be that people who have questions about this will contact school committee members directly, so that we can
Right.
actually engage in this process, because we are the elected.
So is that the better process than dealing with the administration?
It is, because that's the structure that we're supposed to be going through here. And really, the administration, the district is supposed to be its own thing, and we aren't part of the district as elected school committee representatives. We have 3 Essex representatives that represent Essex. When we come to the table to make those votes as a committee about what to do with the budget, if people are only talking with Pam and Avi from the town leadership, and the committee members don't actually engage in that process, and we aren't contacted with questions and things like that, it's hard for one person who's sitting on the finance subcommittee and, or, sitting in collaboration meeting, because I'd like to just correct, we do have school committee representation in the collaboration group, that was omitted. It's hard for one person to help everyone understand, no, the town really does care about this, and here's why. It's better if the school committee elected reps are representing our town in that way. So that really is the best way to do it. It doesn't mean we'll always have all the answers, and sometimes we might turn to get them from there, but it gives us a chance to do our job in service, and also a chance to grow and understand what kind of issues and questions are coming forward.
Right? So I'll change my way.
That's the hope. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Jeff, while we still have you, and before I go to my public hearing, we want to talk about the VADAR systems,
Okay.
just so I can let you leave us. So on our agenda this evening, we have an agenda item to consider the approval of a contract for the provision of both tax collection software and accounting software to replace the products now in use in those departments. I knew that Brooke was not going to be joining us this evening, so I had an opportunity to ask lots of my questions earlier, and I have a good understanding. Guy, do you have any questions about this? No. So at this time, I will make a motion to approve the VADAR systems software as presented in our,
And I think we have a contract.
do we have a contract? Because I didn't get a
Yeah,
contract.
hold on.
Oh, you know what? Do you have a contract? Perfect. Do you want to second my motion?
Yeah, second, sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I will sign the contract.
Thank you. Do you have some
We
time?
have 5 minutes.
Okay, so going back to the town administrator's report. We had some damage to the town hall in the recent windstorm. We had asphalt shingles fly off of the uppermost roof, which is the bell tower roof. And one of those shingles actually swirled around and broke a window. So fortunately, it was just the outer pane, and we already have a glass company that has ordered the new sealed unit that's going to be replacing the glass in that window. The more challenging thing is how to get the roof repaired. We did have some shingles pull off while the roof was still under warranty, and it required the contractor to bring in a lift, which is very expensive, $2,500 to $3,000 a day, and they fixed that because it was still part of the warranty. Then, more recently, we had a few shingles lift up but not actually tear off, and we were able to get the correct adhesive, and the fire department was able to go up since it was a limited area and they weren't nailing shingles, they were just putting the adhesive under the edges and gluing them back down, and we thought we were going to be okay. Well, we had an even more violent windstorm, and now we've actually lost shingles from a section of this particular roof, which is a very curved style roof, difficult to keep the shingles down on. And so the question comes as to what the town's going to do next, because now, I mean, it's going to be a time where you have to bring in a lift again. It's not going to be on the contractor's dime. It's not going to be as simple as bringing in the fire ladder truck. In fact, that truck can't even safely reach this particular face. And so if you bring in someone to do a repair and you pay that $2,500 or $3,000, but the rest of the roof is just as vulnerable, it's possible that you're going to have to bring the lift in again. And there's no way around that. There's no safe way to go up there. Anyone who repairs it, no matter how many times it's going to be repaired, is going to get you, three grand literally to get off the ground. And then on top of that, the cost of the project. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion. I don't know if you have any ideas there, but.
No, I'm waiting to hear back from contractors, so
Right.
I'm in
Right.
discussion.
Right now, it is covered by ice and water shield, so it's not like water's pouring through. And if water even gets through, it's only going to hit the upper part of the clock tower, which has the clockworks in it. But the clockworks, because they were so, forward thinking, when they built the town hall, the clockworks has its own small roof on top of it inside the bell tower. So if water actually leaked down, it would actually hit that roof and go onto the floor. Then it would go through the floor and onto the next level where the bell is, but that's lined with impervious membrane with drains. It's not how the building's supposed to work, and we don't want that to happen for a while, but we're not going to actually have water damaging the clockworks. That's the key.
I understand the Big Ben Tower is working again, so maybe we'll be next.
We might be able to do it. So, all right, we'll get more information and bring this back.
We have 1 minute.
Okay. Let's see. I had items on the tentative budget hearing and the collaboration group meeting summary, but I think we've covered that. They're covered separately in my report, just to give more detail. Beyond that, we've got the operating and capital budget. We need to, let's see. I think we should just wait for the hearing now and pick this back up.
Being 7 o'clock, I will make a motion to open the public hearing to consider whether the town will exercise the town's right of first refusal pursuant to General Law, Chapter 61A, Section 14, to purchase the property known as 30 Apple Street, Assessor's Map 142, Lot 8, and possibly to execute any and all documents necessary or convenient in connection with the acquisition of said property, including, but not limited to, a notice of exercise and purchase and sale agreement. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is now open. So town council has prepared documentation for the purchase and sale agreement for the town of Essex to purchase 30 Apple Street, which was formerly known as the Fry property. It recently went through fall town meeting and was voted in favor of for the town to purchase. We are still doing some of the due diligence with the title search project, or process rather, and we have the documents here this evening. It is a public hearing, so if there's any questions related to this is not to say more of a formality, but I will be taking another motion shortly, but I do want to answer any questions if anybody has any. So anybody in the room with us with any questions about this? No. Anybody on the phone? Do you have any questions about 30 Apple Street and the public hearing? Okay. Can I just make this motion and move on?
Yeah, so I would actually close the hearing and then take the votes.
Okay. So I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move that the Board of Selectmen exercise its statutory right of first refusal pursuant to Chapter 61A, Section 14, to purchase approximately 11.5 acres of land and improvements thereon located at 30 Apple Street, Essex, Assessor's Parcel 142-8, owned by H. Whitney Wagner, trustee of Both Sides Real Estate Trust, Peter M. Sherwood, trustee of Lydia C.F. Sherwood 2000 Revocable Trust, and H. Whitney Wagner, personal representative of the estate of Minnow A. Fry, and authorize the chair of the Board of Selectmen to execute any and all documents necessary or convenient in connection with the acquisition of said property, including, but not limited to, a notice of exercise and purchase and sale agreement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll go back to the report. And so you'll come in to notarize that, okay. The board at your last meeting looked at the draft Selectmen's fiscal year 2024 operating budget and capital budget requests. There was input given by the board at the time, and I've made any changes in accordance with the board's guidance. And this is due tomorrow. I don't know if the board has further questions. We can certainly still amend it.
No, I have none.
I had submitted the potential for an increase to the personnel board. You were going to look at that. That's not included in this, the latest draft. Will that come out
I
after
think
the
it
fact?
says, I think we've got an entry in the memo, though.
Okay.
Let's see here. Could be the last one.
It's number 10.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that that
Yeah,
covers
so
us without a number.
that's put in there, and there's more research that we're doing. As we found out today, I need to do even more detailed, make some calls and stuff, so. Yeah, it's a placeholder in there.
Placeholder. Okay, perfect.
So is the board ready to vote to submit these?
Yeah, I think so. Let me. I will make a motion that the board vote to approve the fiscal year 2024 operating budget request.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I will make a motion that the board vote to approve its fiscal year 2024 capital budget request.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In annual town meeting topics, I made some changes as per the board's guidance at the last meeting. One thing that I think we may need to add in here is that if the recommendation to the Board of Public Works to use Commonwealth is acceptable, and remember, the selectmen have to sign that contract anyway, but I know you're trying to work with the people who actually manage the area, it's going to take a town meeting vote in order to get the contract out to a sufficient number of years to be beneficial, especially if you're buying another trailer-style compactor. Our understanding is that the contractor would like to start with a 5-year contract and then a 3-year option, which would be up to 8 years. In order to get a contract for more than 3 years, town meeting has to vote on that. So it would be great to try to get town meeting to say yes to, say, a 10-year contract, because that's what we're used to. And if we can negotiate up to 10 years, then that would be all the better. But is the board interested in getting that long-term contract vote on the town meeting warrant?
I am, but in reading the exchange from Commonwealth, they didn't seem willing to negotiate on that term.
Well,
It
they
was
said
5 and 3.
five with 3, right?
So, yeah, so
They
over
didn't seem
3.
willing to negotiate, but the town could say up to 10, and if we get that between May and July, then all the better.
Okay, yes, absolutely, tier 1.
So I see, we did have a brief conversation the last time about this, the first item on the second tier. It had been the last item on the first tier before. The field inspector to assist building
Yep.
inspector with enforcement. I see it's moved down
Right, that was,
per Ruth's comment.
yes.
Or I don't know that I really agree with that. I think if there's a way that we can do this that's maybe not a full-time employee, and it's not a long, it's not a big, huge investment. I just think my experience is that oftentimes we just lack the capacity to enforce our rules, and I think this is one way that we might be able to respond to that.
Was that something the board wants to put back up into the first tier, or?
Well, I'm wondering if this couldn't be remedied by talking with our assistant building inspector, Mr. Orlando, and talking about, his job description. And I know that we've actually talked to him before about what he does and the hours he spends in town. But maybe as the personnel board, we kind of redirect where we want to see some of those hours spent. And maybe it is in enforcement, or, instead of being in the office waiting for people to come in, maybe he is out in the field.
So my understanding was that he was fully engaged in his current duties. So that, I guess that's why this seems sort of like an interesting idea to me.
I'm not opposed to it going back to tier 1. I guess I was a little bit concerned that we have a tough budget season,
Get it?
a big spend, a heavy lift. We know that we asked all departments to level fund. We know that we're looking at a 2% COLA, and we now have heard that we have several different departments coming for raises. So, I'm not opposed to it being in tier 1. It was my suggestion initially. I love the idea.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid, it's about funding it.
Well, yeah, right.
If we had a volunteer that wanted to do it for free and be an enforcement officer, I would be all for it right now.
Well,
So do you want it moved up for the next iteration? You can always move it back down after.
yeah, we can talk about it then.
Yeah, or move it to tier 1 and we can loop Peter in.
So I'll move it up for the next one.
Sure.
And I also wanted to point out that we've gotten a variety of ideas now that the town is definitely moving forward with the Apple Street purchase. We've gotten a variety of ideas from people as to what the town could also use that property for, not just access to the transfer station or secondary access. And one person asked that I bring it up to you, which would be, their idea is a solar farm. And I said I would put that on the table, but and that would also require a lot of thought, because you might be able to bring in a company that would fund it initially. It might not be a capital expense, but also people in the area may or may not be very interested in living next to such a thing. But you've heard the other ideas. I said that I would at least bring this up under the town meeting in case there was any aspect of it that had to do with the need for a town meeting vote. Like, if you were going to do something like this, do you have to do a lease to the company that would be running it, that type of thing. So it's just food for thought. I've brought it up, and if it's an idea you want to pursue, just let me know.
And you know that we've had 6 or 7 people reach out to us about their ideas and what they'd like to see done with Apple Street. And I've been very clear with everybody to say, we don't officially own it yet. And until we take ownership, we're not doing anything. We're not making promises. And I think it's important for the residents to have a voice in knowing what's going to happen with that piece of property. If anything, right away, we're not, there's no hurry to go and do something on it. So I think we get through the purchase process, and then we hear what the residents want, and we, have public hearings and we talk about those ideas. But thank you for presenting it. I appreciate it.
Sure. Is there anything else on that item?
Not
I have one other thing on, it's the first tier, possible adoption, new state law allowing communities to collect 3%. Has the town accountant done anything on that? Do we need to try to push that forward a little, or
Well, he still hasn't gotten the data back that says what the short-term rental take is versus the regular hotel motel.
So is that coming? I mean, is he working on that?
He is working on it. I'll get an update for the next meeting. All right. The next item is the community planning grant kickoff. So this was a grant that totals $90,000 when the match from MAPC is factored in. It intends to follow on from the work that was conducted when the zoning diagnostic was done with the first grant that we got. A small group kicked off the project, and there's going to be a larger group convening, bringing in some of these folks that are termed zoning champions that we'll be reaching out to. And then eventually, on the 25th of January, there's a joint meeting here in the auditorium involving the planning board, the selectmen, and MAPC personnel, which is really the first time there'll be a public discussion of the work that's ahead and what the intentions are. So I just wanted to bring it up because it has kicked off. I don't know if there were any questions or input at this time.
My comment for the public would certainly be that we will have a big effort to enlist the help of zoning ambassadors, which is going to be just everyday regular residents in the neighborhood that are interested in, the protections afforded to them under zoning or strengthening of the bylaws to protect their personal property, which is probably your single most biggest asset. So if anyone hearing us this evening, watching us online in the room, is interested in becoming a zoning ambassador, which means you would come to certain planning board meetings, hear the information, spread it out in the community, we would be more than happy to have you be part of our team. So you can reach out to myself or Lisa O'Donnell, the chair of the planning board. Thank you.
Next is the Massachusetts Downtown.
The 25th. In West, that will be virtual as well as up here on the third floor. So we'll be filming, so it'll be live as well as recorded to be viewed after the fact.
The Massachusetts Downtown Initiative Placemaking Grant. This is a grant that seeks to take all of the publicly owned or controlled small spaces in the downtown area that range from the lot next door here where the fire station once sat to the Paglia Park that'll be put back in place after the bridge is completed, to small areas with benches, etc. And the hope is to work with a consultant who is paid directly by the Department of Housing and Community Development, and their name is Civic Space Collaborative, $25,000 for them to help the town develop a good cohesive plan that pulls all this together. If you visit these areas now, there's no particular plan, and there's no it's just not tied together well. It's also going to draw into it the fact that we have decorative lighting being designed very soon and installed probably this summer, which will have the ability to put up banners, and it will have the ability to have plants hung. That is also going to be starting to continuing to establish the downtown as a place, giving it its own feel, its own brand. The work will also benefit from input that we get when the town deals with another grant, which is what I was going to talk about next, which is the Urban Agenda Grant, and that's for an off-season event to help drive business to the downtown area. During that event, the hope is to actually have the people who attend the event provide their input on what would make a more cohesive sense of place for downtown Essex. So those two things are also kicking off. I put some more details in my report. I don't know if you have questions on either one of those.
I don't.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
So that puts us down to the possible grant for Centennial Grove improvements versus other grants. And the reason I say versus other grants is that one thing we were looking at this time last year with the YMCA was a potential to use their status as a noted civic organization to perhaps get funding for improvements down at the Centennial Grove, talking about restrooms. And at the time, the replacement of the Folsom Pavilion and also improvements to the other buildings that we have down there. And we didn't do it because they all come under this Community One Stop for Growth umbrella. And at the time, since the key interest of the town was the zoning grant that I just discussed, the community planning grant, we did not put in for a different grant program under the same umbrella that would go for those improvements, because it would have been competing with the zoning grant, and we didn't want the chance that we wouldn't get the zoning grant, because that's imperative to finish the work of town meeting, which imposed a moratorium so we could study some things. Other grants that are under that same umbrella have also been suggested this year. One of them would allow the town to do deed research on those parcels that are out by Route 128. Remember, the board talked about them, and we have an estimate from the title attorney that would say that probably $100,000 could be spent, and you may or may not even get to the end of the title work. And if you don't get the title work done, it can't go into tax title, so that potentially the town could own that large parcel and potentially, with access from 128 or Southern Avenue, develop a business area for economic development. So that's something that the money could be used for. We could also partner with the YMCA for the Grove improvements. But now we're hearing that perhaps the Grove Cottage could be of interest to other organizations like the Kestrel Educational Adventures that we talked to earlier tonight. And then there's another grant that would help determine what the future uses of 30 Apple Street could be, walk through those different things like a solar farm or other things that we've heard about, and help the town tease out what would be the best thing for the town. The problem is, once again, they're all under that umbrella, and it comes down to whether the board has a particular one interest over another. Otherwise, you'll be kind of competing against yourself again under that umbrella, and it's unlikely that you're going to get two things funded under that.
My feeling on this is I think we have momentum right now with Centennial Grove. I think the Economic Development Committee has been pretty passionate about moving that forward, wanting to do improvements and start to generate income in the near future. While I like the idea of the, parcels unknown, I think that's more of a kind of a long game. I think that that's going to be lengthy work, and it's probably going to require potentially multiple grants. And then, engineering and studies and construction and permitting. So there's a lot that goes into that. My feeling at this moment is, since I've already asked the chairman of the Economic Development Committee to add to their agenda for discussion of use of Centennial Grove, I think we should add this as an agenda item as well, if she was willing, and have them weigh in, since they're going to be doing a lot of the work with where, how to bring revenues to the town and what the town's capacity is, so that we're not pushing our fire department over that threshold into a full-time department and things like that. I think we should let them weigh in on this. So I'd like to bring that back after.
And we
a
have plenty of
recommendation.
time, and this is a good time to start vetting that, because when it comes time to actually make an application, you'll know which one you want to go for.
Yep.
So I can,
And there's no particular champion for the Route 128 project at this point?
just the people on the Economic Development Committee, they're very interested in it, but they understand that $100,000 to get maybe where you need to go is a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough nut.
Then we have the award of the GAP 3 grant for drinking water and wastewater facilities. This is a grant that the town planner worked on, and it's $109,500. And what it does, it looks at putting in variable frequency drives at one of our pump stations. It looks at transformer upgrades at the water treatment plant, and it looks at water treatment plant boiler upgrade. And of course, the goal of this grant is energy efficiency. But if you select things that need to be replaced anyway, it becomes both energy efficiency and a way of funding maintenance and upgrades that we would have to pay for anyway. So I'm glad that we got it, and my recommendation here is for the board to authorize the chairman to sign whatever grant contract comes when the state gets around to sending us the paperwork.
So I'll make a motion that the board authorize the chairman to sign all necessary grant paperwork when available.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
And the final item on my report is each year around this time, the board, this will be the third year in a row, the board has to kind of grapple with whether the town should seek opting out of any mandatory mosquito spraying that would be imposed by the state during the mosquito season due to a public health emergency. In year one, it was just kind of getting started, and the Department of Public Health and the State Reclamation Board accepted plans that did not have the elements that they expected in year two. And the town of Essex actually applied in year two for an opt-out. And expectedly, we were rejected, because although we can do education and outreach, and we had an intern that did some excellent work in that area, we don't have the physical plant, if you will, to be able to go and prove that we can keep public health, protect public health by doing our own spraying. We don't have that in-house, and we're not a member of the Northeast Mosquito Management District or Control District. And so at this point, my recommendation would be don't even seek the opt-out, because you don't have the tools to get it, and we've proven that by trying it last year.
Right.
It's very unlikely in this part of the state that there is going to be a mandatory mosquito spray, and in fact, I don't know that it's ever happened. Someone like Wes might know, but yeah. Now, with climate change, if we continue to get warmer weather and warmer shoulder seasons, and things change to be more conducive to mosquito populations, and we get a wetter environment, that could change. But right now, I don't expect it, and so I think not getting an opt-out is not a huge risk.
Well,
So-
as we know from many town meetings.
Right. Nobody
it's-
does.
I was just going to say, our residents are not in favor of
Right.
opting in.
So when the call comes out, we're simply going to say, thanks, but we're not interested, correct?
Yep.
All right, that's my report.
Thank you. I will make a motion to approve the weekly warrant in the amount of $226,490.78.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to vote to exempt from Section 20 of Chapter 268A of the general laws the contracts and amounts for the individuals listed below contained within the contracts contained within the 12/15/2022 warrant pursuant to subsection D of said section.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to vote to exempt from Section 20 of Chapter 268A of the general laws the contracts and amounts for the individuals listed below contained within the 12/22/22 warrant pursuant to subsection D of said section.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to approve the minutes for the Selectmen's December 12th, 2022 open meeting and executive session.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to vote to accept a gift in the amount of $250 to the Town Property Gift Fund from Irvy Corporation.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will vote to accept a donation to the Police Department gift account in the amount of $300 from Ed and Pat Marchetti.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to ratify the chairman's signature on the contract amendment to the fiscal year 22 firefighter safety equipment grant in the amount of $9,225.21.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to ratify the chairman's signature on the paperwork for the fiscal year 23 firefighter safety equipment grant in the amount of $12,492.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to vote to appoint Keith Cotter as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a 2-year term commencing on 2/1/2023 upon the expiration of his second 3-year term on the board.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to consider a request from Open Space Committee Chair Julie Schofield to appoint Rebecca Davis to one of the vacant positions on the Open Space Committee for a partial 1-year term ending 6/30/23.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to consider the use of a fund appropriated in 2016 by the annual town meeting to board the dwellings and fence off the garage buildings at the Allen property on Southern Avenue. So a little bit of information. We had a resident of Essex that had driven by the Allen property after the last storm, and he felt that there was a little bit more of a partial collapse, and he was concerned. So the building inspector did go take a look, and he feels that the doors have blown open and the locks are no longer working in proper working condition. So he'd like us to board up the 2 houses with boards on the front and back door and just screw those in so that the dwellings can't be accessed. And then the barn is in too much of disrepair to actually board it up. So we're going to be getting, if we vote in favor, we'll get a fence that is freestanding on legs and not going to penetrate the ground to just cordon off the barn so that it's not going to fall.
Right, and it would go behind the barn, and there's a dilapidated shed behind it, so we'd ring the whole thing.
Okay.
And I have been out onto the site with the company that would do the fencing and the boarding up. We use them for other things, but I don't have their quote yet. It'll certainly be well within the budget that town meeting gave, which was $25,000.
Yeah, and that we're doing this in lieu of any more strategic moves because we're still not in a position to do.
Correct, and the fire department actually shared the concern, and although it's not strictly a liability problem for the town, because we are not the owner of the property, it's really the right thing to do for public safety.
It's great.
So is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next agenda item is preliminary consideration on whether the town should exercise a right of first refusal for the purchase of 31 Apple Street, Assessors Map 142, Lot 014. So as was the situation with 30 Apple Street, 31 Apple Street, which was also known as B.J. Fry's property, was held under conservation restriction or Chapter 61A land, and therefore it did not pay the same taxes. It had a tax kind of, not credit, but they didn't pay the same taxes that they would had it not been chapter land. So the town gets the first right of refusal to purchase the land. We do have the P&S in front of us. We can see what the asking price was. And I think at this time, we should take it under advisement and potentially go into executive session at our next meeting so that the selectmen can talk about what they want to do. And I think in the course of the next 2 weeks, reach out, do some public outreach, and feel the residents out and see how they feel about this. So this parcel, which is 31 Apple Street, is a 9-acre parcel. And so slightly smaller than 30 Apple Street, but it does have an existing house on there and probably the ability to have buildable lots as well. So I think we should, unless you have questions, I think we should just take this under advisement and discuss in an executive session at the next meeting.
Right, I agree.
I will make a motion to ratify the chairman's signature on the nomination of Annie Cameron as the Essex representative to the Action Inc. Board of Directors.
So moved, or second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So before us this evening, we have a letter signed by Alex Edwards, president of the Essex Police Association. He wrote a letter to Town Administrator Zubricki and the Board of Selectmen with concerns about the training of police officers. So the letter reads, dated December 15th, 2022, and it reads, "We are writing to you today regarding an issue of critical importance and impact on public safety. It has come to our attention that the town will not send current reserves to a full-time academy, despite efforts from our chief of police to explain his concerns that the Bridge Academy will not provide sufficient training for these officers. We understand that reserve officers may receive either a waiver or exemption from attending the full-time MPTC Academy. We do not dispute that this meets legislative and/or regulatory requirements, and that it is a cost-effective means of bringing police officers up to a legally adequate level of training. However, we, the officers of the Essex Police Association, have serious reservations about allowing part-time reserve officers to attain the same status as full-time academy-trained officers. Proper training should not be compromised for the sake of financial savings. The town has always trained officers through a full-time academy, and without maintaining that standard, there is no way to ensure officers servicing the people of Essex are properly or equally trained. There is a reason that the legislature left the decision for recommending attendance at this academy to law enforcement agencies rather than town officials. We would strongly urge you to listen to the concerns raised by the chief of police and echoed here by the union. Thank you for hearing our concerns on this matter. Sincerely, Alexander Edwards, Essex Police Association, MCOP Local 270. So, Town Administrator Zubricki, you and I have had conversations with Town Council regarding the Bridge Academy versus the full-time academy. So, for those of you that don't know what the Bridge Academy is a shorter training. I believe is it 240 or 400 hours? 240?
No, it's 1,200 on the job, and I think it's 240.
240, yeah. So the Bridge Academy is kind of an abbreviated training program that officers do online, as well as firearms training and some other different aspects of training. And the legislature has said that it is the equivalent to the full-time academy. However, they've left it up to the police departments to determine whether or not they would want full-time academy trained employees or not. So I guess I have a few questions that you probably have answers to. Do you want to actually speak to kind of the conversations we had with council, just so that we can let the people know why those decisions were made and kind of the cost difference between the free academy or the $50,000?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing to point out is that even though the full-time academy would put a candidate through more rigorous training, especially in person, it doesn't require, usually a recruit would go through the full-time academy and then they would start their job as a police officer. The Bridge Academy, which came about as a result of the police reform law and indicating that all police officers have to be trained to a certain level, it eliminated something called the part-time police academy, which is what our part-time officers used to go to, and said if they pass the Bridge Academy, that's just as good as being full-time trained. And so it all comes through the police reform law. But under the Bridge Academy, model, not only do you complete the academy, you also have to complete 1,200 hours of on-the-job actual work before you're deemed to have completed the program. So one of them is a bunch of training up front, but here you go, you're working, and the other one is here's some training, but you have to get through successfully through the on-the-job experience before you're deemed to be. So I don't see that it's entirely so one-sided as it's made out to be. The other thing I wanted to comment on the letter is that although I'm told the letter was getting at if you're going to be taking a part-time officer and promoting that person up to be a full-time officer, they're saying that that person should have the full-time academy. But that's not what the letter says. It just says that all part-time officers should have a full-time academy training behind them. Well, we're not going to do that because there's no reason to do that. And the most recent instance of an officer coming up from a part-time position to a full-time position has already passed, and that person has already been made a conditional offer of employment, which had a condition within it to pass the Bridge Academy, not the full-time academy. The union knew this full well, but this letter came in after that. So perhaps this is talking about times in the future when a part-time candidate is being considered for a full-time position. We don't have any such openings right now, but I guess that's what they're asking the board to consider.
So that was I had two questions. One, and you may know the answer is this request for future hires? So anybody after today's date? And that was, but I guess we don't know
It's the only
answer.
thing it can be, because no, the town isn't going to put people who intend to stay part-time through the full-time academy at great expense. And no, there isn't anyone right now that we could have do that because that person's already been offered something under a different situation.
And then my second question would be, as the conditions on, if we were to post a job for a full-time police officer, couldn't we just post that position to hire a full-time academy, a trained officer as part of the hiring requirement? Or is that
Yes,
discriminatory?
yeah, you could. If you need that person who's full-time trained already, even if you have somebody in-house who would like the position, but they're not full-time trained, yes, you could just go outside and get candidates who already have it. Certainly.
So,
Right, I'm not sure why you do that, but.
because they've already been through the full-time academy, so it would save the town $50,000.
Right. Oh, okay.
Because the town has to cover, if you're going to put somebody through the,
So you're not, okay. So you're not
Backfill
looking for
shifts and all
someone
that.
who's been through the part-time and the OJT and whatnot.
No, you're looking for somebody that, maybe is a full-time police officer in Manchester and they don't love it over there, so they want to come to Essex, but they've already been through the full-time academy. So the full-time academy isn't,
You're not precluding hiring someone who became a full-time officer by going through the Bridge and the part-time.
you would make it a condition of the hiring that they must be MPTC trained already to be considered for employment. I'm not saying that we have to do this. I'm just making the suggestion that couldn't this be done to mitigate the concern about putting part-timers through the full-time academy? And I'm not opposed to the full-time academy. I think it's a great thing. I just think that there's a cost associated with it
Right.
that's pricey. And it's not just about the dollar figure. Part of the issue is, as we've heard from the chief over and over and over again, he doesn't have the staff to cover all the shifts because we've lost so many part-timers due to criminal justice reform. So should we put somebody in the full-time academy, you're, filling it, you're backfilling it with overtime, and you're forcing, they're called forced shifts. So now you're forcing your full-time officers to come in as overtime. So there's a lot that goes into this equation. It's not just a matter of the Bridge Academy versus not.
Right. Got it.
So I guess we don't have to really deal with this at this point since we have no plans on hiring any full-time police officers.
that's right.
We'll take it under advisement. If I could just have everybody on the phone with us mute their phone, that would be great. Thank you. I will if we can discuss the extent of the cost of living allowance for retirees receiving pensions as a member of the Essex Regional Retirement District.
So the Essex Regional Retirement District normally does something around a 3% cost of living increase for retirees. Now, this is only on, I think, something like the first $13,000 of someone's pension. So it's never on the retiree's full pension. Recently, there was a request for this year to consider, because of what's happening in the economy, consider that 3% go to 5%. It's usually something that's handled by the Regional Retirement Board. It doesn't come to the town level. In this particular case, the additional 2% is something that's coming before the town, because they made that part of the approval process. While it's not a lot of money per person, because it's only on a limited amount of their annual pension, when you add that up throughout the entire retirement district, it can be sizable, and it actually puts the goal where they're trying to pre-fund the benefits, puts it out even more than it is now. They're trying, like we're doing for the other post-employment benefits, which is retiree health insurance. They have a mandate to try to get to additional funding, which all the towns are paying now, paying toward it, so that if they get enough money amassed, the pension system can be self-funding through interest earned on a large amount of money. But now you add something like this in, and it makes the goal even larger to attain. That said, it's really a matter of policy as to whether you want to see the extra 2% given this year. And each unit in the district is going to have to report in with, whether you approve of it or not.
I question whether, I don't think I would want to do this. I think we're looking at a 2% increase for our town employees. I don't see why we would want to consider this.
I agree.
Just certainly a matter of policy. So.
Yeah, I just feel like we have our employees that serve us all day, every day, and it's, given that we've told them to level fund and that they're only getting a 2% COLA, I feel like it would be a little bit of a slap in the face. So I'm not in favor of this.
Okay, so I'll report back that the town of Essex did not take action to support the 5%, the extra 2%.
Under the Personnel Board this evening, we have a request from Town Clerk Pamela Thorne to consider increasing the town clerk salary range starting in fiscal year 2024. Pamela, I saw that you were on the phone with us. If you want to unmute, we do have your request before us, and you certainly don't need to review, the voters and the stats and all of that good stuff, but if you just want to give a little bit of context behind it, we can, just for people listening in.
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So I put together that memo after the state enacted the 2022 Votes Act, which has really expanded vote by mail and in-person early voting started this year. I'm all in favor of all of that, but it has really increased our workload dramatically for all town clerks. You can see some of the statistics that I gave you. In addition to the expanded vote by mail, in 2020, they enacted automatic voter registration. So anybody conducting transactions at the Registry of Motor Vehicles or through the Mass Health Connector gets automatically their voter registration updated. It really didn't impact me too much in 2020 because people were, in the throes of COVID, but it's ramped up now. And that is a lot more work as well. I have to review every voter registration, determine whether to certify. It's just the last 2 years have, the duties of the town clerk's office have changed and increased dramatically. So I was hoping that we could look at the salary range of the town clerk's position to see if we could bump that up a little bit. I've given you a comparison of other town clerk salaries in the region. Also looking at some of the department head salaries within Essex. My opinion is that the clerk's salary could use a bump.
Thank you, Pamela. Selectman Bradford, do you have any questions?
No, I was struck by the amount of overtime that our clerk puts in based on this narrative. That seems really interesting.
Yeah, the voting requirements definitely
That's changed,
have changed, and it's
and
more.
it's brought on this need.
Yeah, it's not only just more work that you might have to stay late to do, it's actually staying open during odd times to accommodate the law.
Right, yeah, no, so I'm also struck by the comparables in the other towns. We seem to be a little bit out of step.
And I know earlier tonight, we heard from some other departments, and we were talking about the note on the selectmen's thing about the inspectors. I think there's going to be several requests like this. We've already seen a few, and it might be good for you to take them all together once everything is in. And we'll be seeing them soon because the budget requests are due tomorrow. And I'd like to really get a sense of the whole breadth of what we're looking at so the board can see everything together.
So Pamela, I agree, Brendan, thank you. Pamela, I do have just a couple of questions. In page 2, just above the compensation chart that you provided, you outlined some of the overtime or additional hours that you're working that Selectman Bradford's referring to, and you talk about that you've counted up at least 20 extra hours now required to fulfill the Votes Act, that you're working 10 days prior to the elections, and then Tuesday elections, which we know are late at night, and then counting votes, that you're working Saturdays, you're here until at least 5 p.m., and you comment that you're here on Friday or Saturday with no additional compensation. My question for you on that is, do you get comp time? Like, I realize that you're not getting compensation in a monetary value, but do you get comp time off for the hours that you're putting in above and beyond your normal hours required?
Not officially. We are supposed to work Fridays, 4.5 hours when the town hall is not open. I will say that I have, taken a few Fridays where I haven't come into the office, but generally, I can't do that.
Right.
It is allowed.
When I have to be here.
For a salaried employee, it's allowed to take time to compensate.
Right, I agree, except when you write something with no additional compensation time, there may not be a monetary value to compensation, but not coming into a building for 4.5 hours is still comp time. You're compensated by
it can
washing.
Be done.
Right,
It can be done.
absolutely. So Pamela, thank you for answering. That was my only question, honestly. And
Okay, I would say
started
that-
doing some research, just comparing towns and population and salaries. So I'm doing my own research as well, and I appreciate how much effort you put into this, and we will take it under advisement. And like Brendan said, we have a lot of departments coming to us, so I think we'll need to kind of take this all as we receive it and give decisions as we move forward in the budget process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night. So we have 3 licenses before us this evening, and I will make a motion to ratify the signatures from the board on the antiques license for Diamonds and Rust, antiques license renewal for the Essex Exchange, and the common victular license for Essex Pizza and Restaurant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have 2 reminders. The next regular Board of Selectmen's meeting will take place on Monday, January 23rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the 3rd floor auditorium of the Town Hall. And the Board of Selectmen will be meeting jointly with the Planning Board on Wednesday, January 25th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the 3rd floor auditorium at 30 Martin Street. It's not on my reminders, but there is a school committee meeting tomorrow evening. It's important that we are all participating as part of the budget process, and that's it. So I'm going to do public comment at this time. We are going into executive session, so I want to make sure that we have comment from the public. Is there anybody on the line this evening that would like to make public comment? Just please unmute yourself, identify yourself, name and address.
Hi, Bruce. It's Nina. I'd love to make a comment, but I
Hi,
can
Nina.
wait my turn.
Go right ahead.
Hi. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year all. So I had actually two quick questions. Certainly I have some familiarity. One was around the cost that came up at the very beginning with the solid waste. Just either what amount of communication can come within the community, because there's rising level concern knowing that next month we all have to buy new stickers. And in terms of what the bag costs will be, if we're going now with Commonwealth, and this is all new information that I was hearing, apologize if I missed a different meeting, but with Commonwealth, we like the idea. It might be cheaper per haul. They use the same type of hauling vehicle to work with our current compactor. But if I recall from some meetings, maybe last quarter, the compactor is out of date. So I know it needs to get replaced, but not many companies use this type of compactor. So I guess because we have the 6-month window extension, is there any reason for a slight look, big picture of curbside? And I love the dump, so I'm not saying I want curbside. I'm just saying, it just seems that between the dump sticker getting into the $400+ range, buying bags, potentially buying a compactor that actually only worked for one company, if I'm understanding it correctly, will that in the end come out not favorable for the town? So that was one aspect. And then the other was just, I know you mentioned something, and I apologize, I didn't hear it, about wanting the community June 25th zoning. You'd love people to get involved. If there's either more information on it, I'm happy to go on the website, or if there's a quick way to summarize that. I just didn't catch it all.
So we're looking for zoning ambassadors that are going to be residents in the community that support zoning efforts. And we're not talking about district zoning or zoning maps. We're talking about strengthening bylaws and making sure that we have protections in place to make some of the bylaws a little stronger. For instance, the special permit process, we're talking about making some other things that happen in town a special permit process, and looking at just different protections like that. So people in the community that have a far reach, big friend groups, huge email lists that want to get involved so that they can spread the word as we move forward. I would encourage you to attend the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board on January 25th. It will be virtual, so you can call in like you are this evening, but that's when we will really kind of unveil what the ambassador looks like, what their kind of job description is going to be, so to speak, as a volunteer, how much dedication they'll have to have, and they're going to get, a little mini paragraph that they're going to use when talking about, the support in the community. So, and I think it was pretty heavily supported since we were successful in getting an extension on our moratorium. As far as going back to the solid waste contract, Nina, I think I can answer most of it, and if I can't, I have obviously Town Administrator Zubricki, and we also have DPW Commissioner Wesley Burnham in the room with us this evening. So let me do the best I can. As you know, we have a 6-month extension. It's a multi-purpose extension, which is one, to get things coordinated to line up with the fiscal year, the budget season, so that things are more in line. And it is helpful to have the contracts all kind of end at the end of a fiscal year. The second thing is, we've been working on this for just about a year now, looking at 7 different seven different companies, looking for proposals that would be willing to do our solid waste removal and disposal. And in that time frame, which is the last year, we danced with 7 companies. Only Covanta was willing to kind of do a partial, but not all, and Casella was at last go around the only one interested, and then Commonwealth kind of came into the mix.
And there was briefly one company that showed promise, and then they said, no, we're not going to do it.
And then they said no. And we've been holding off on the decision for the compactor and which one to go with, simply because we needed to make sure that we had the most the best rate with a company before we would choose the compactor. So the company we go with is what was going to determine the compactor we purchased. So if we went with Casella, we would have a smaller, I think 2 smaller compactors that was going to, or
Well, no,
smaller, so they would do more
a
hauls.
smaller compactor for solid waste. The other 2 compactors would be for
recycling.
recycling, and that's separate.
But if we went with the smaller compactor with Casella, we would be paying for more hauls per week. So with Commonwealth, the contract is financially more prudent, which is why that was the discussion this evening. So we've done, and certainly, you're welcome to any of the materials we have to take a look at the numbers especially as a finance committee member, you might have.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't see them.
Yeah, certainly. Wes Burnham, actually one of our DPW commissioners, is here in the room and has raised his hand. So I'm going to let him step to the microphone for me so everyone can hear him and answer your question. Thank you.
First off, First off, we don't have any answers yet.
Right, we're working on it.
One thing I wanted to point out that is surfacing is, depending on which compactor we go with, whether it's a large trailer capacity or the smaller roll-off units, the roll-off units become more of a problem because now we have to maintain somebody available to swap them out, especially on a Saturday. So that cost is skewing the whole argument. So, yeah, we're still working on it. I read Facebook. No, I haven't got any solid answers for you yet. Whether we go straight sticker fee, bag fee, or some kind of hybrid, we're still discussing the best way to approach that.
Did that answer your questions, Nina?
Oh, yeah, no, I certainly appreciate it. I just think because if nothing else, if there's a way for them, the community, to know maybe what the cost of curbside would be, to realize why we're not doing curbside, because I know.
We can give you that answer.
Yeah.
Hang on one second. It's something to the tune of like over $800,000.
Yeah, it's about double the cost.
Yeah, we've pretty much given up on curbside. The cost is almost prohibitive. It's even the best numbers that we've come up with for maintaining what we've got. Curbside was going to be double.
And the reason for that is, right now, the residents are doing all the transportation of getting the waste to a central point. If you have to pay a contractor to do that, it's going to cost a lot more money. It's that simple. There's equipment, fuel, and personnel involved at a much higher level than an operation of a transfer station.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That's helpful, and certainly helpful for any that might have called in too.
Nina, just as a side note, these, well, the Board of Selectmen certainly touch on the solid waste conversation at each meeting, as we have over the course of the last year. But these are hashed out probably more in depth at the DPW commissioner meetings. So feel free to attend those and you'll hear more in-depth conversations. We're just, because we sign the contracts, we touch on it, but we don't talk about kind of the day-to-day nitty-gritty. So you could attend those and that might be helpful as well.
Thank you.
If you enjoy meetings like I do.
Yeah, no,
is there anybody else on the phone with any public comment?
Can I ask that Ruth just add one last thing?
So, repeat that, Nina, I'm sorry.
If I could just add one last thing, because I know you'd mentioned business development, whatever we can do for business development. I know Town Hall is very busy right now with many people in the community going up to the second floor to the assessor's office for abatement forms. Whatever we can do to find ways to drive revenue to the town, there will be support. It is so clear that we have to create revenue for this town. So that was all.
We have committees and we are working diligently. Unfortunately, with a relatively small population and the size of our community, we're limited on the growth that we can withstand without, so we have capacity issues. Keep in mind that one of the biggest things that we struggle with is having a call fire department. So our fire and ambulance are all volunteers or call members. And when we hit a certain capacity, we hit that threshold that pushes us over to the next level. So just keep in mind that, yes, we want to look at economic development and the economy and driving business. Those are all wonderful things. But when you bring more business into town, there's going to be more of a, a need for police and fire and EMT. And then the next thing you know, instead of the $1 million we save by having a call department, we're sitting at this table going, how do we fund that? So there's a fine line on how we strategically do this so that we don't hurt anybody. And my goal, as I sit here, is always not to increase the taxes for our residents, because it's daily we hear about the struggles of our tax bills. So I sympathize with you, and we will do the best we can. You can reach out to Jody Harris, the chair of the Economic Development Committee, if you have some suggestions, because I know that she is very willing and eager to hear any suggestions brought to her. Thank you,
Well,
Nina.
Thank you again.
Is there anybody
thank
else
you.
with
Thanks,
public
all.
comment or a question? We're happy to answer your questions. Okay. Is there anybody in the room? Shelley, if you want to step up to the microphone so the people on the phone can hear you.
Hi, this is Shelley Bradbury, 79 East. I just have a question also on the solid waste. I know you're considering Commonwealth to also be the management and overseeing the running of the transfer station, opposed to, or using DPW, hiring part-time or full-time. And so I guess, are we guaranteed if we use the town that there will be enforcement, because there's not a lot of enforcement now? And if it was run by Commonwealth, they would be liable to enforce excessive dumping and people without stickers. So I guess, what has changed that you would think more part-time or a full-time person would enforce the dumping and create weight and tonnage and make the cost of our fees go up because there's not enforcement?
Yeah, well, as I understand it right now, we do use full-time personnel to watch what's going into the hopper at the transfer station. The problem is, if there's some kind of emergency in town, if there's a snowstorm, if people are out sick or on vacation, we sometimes have trouble covering that. There's lunch breaks, bathroom breaks, and we don't have a lot of people to spread around and say, okay, this person has to leave for a while. We don't always have someone to bring in. So one of the things the selectmen were talking about, and I'm going to bring it to the Board of Public Works, and the recommendation the selectmen made tonight, is we do have a position called part-time DPW laborer. There's also a transfer station or recycling station coordinator. You could, since they're part-time positions and they don't carry benefits, you could hire several of these people on a rotating schedule. You would always have people to backfill. You would always have someone hopefully at the ready to come in, so the enforcement doesn't lag and doesn't suffer. So that's one idea that the board had that I'm going to bring back to the Board of Public Works.
And did you say the difference in cost of if Commonwealth did the management of it compared to part-time employees?
It's like
What's the
70,000.
75
70.
for
A year?
a year, for about 26 hours a week for Commonwealth to do it. And for a town to have a full-time employee, is the salary portion is 42,000 plus health insurance and a pension.
And the town benefits from days when the station isn't closed, that laborer can go.
Right. They would get 2 additional days, 8-hour days of a town employee that the DPW would be able to use them.
Then you brought that out, one additional person is about $83,000 total cost,
Beyond just the salary, yeah.
unemployment, the rest of the stuff that goes with the package. And that's just for low-level labor.
It would still be less, but that's why the selectmen are also asking to explore the use of kind of a whole slate of part-time people that are trained to do the enforcement. You don't have that problem, and it's less than the 83, and it's certainly less than the Commonwealth price, which I'm sure is high because of what they're saying is we're guaranteeing that we're going to send someone there, whether it's snowing, whether someone's sick, we're going to get someone there, and that comes with a cost for convenience.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one other question on Apple Street and the planning board recommendations about using an arborist and a landscape designer. I'm not speaking as a planning board, I'm speaking as a resident. And although it's generous of the people that you mentioned that possibly, they would help out in this because it would be free, I'm leery of doing that. As a resident, I would rather have someone that's hired full-time that are committed to this, and that would be 100% with this job as being an arborist and a landscape consultant. So that's just something that I'm leery of using people in town that have full-time jobs and out of their goodwill will help, but they're not 100% committed and they're not objective. And it would be nice as an independent, objective person viewing this. So that's just my thoughts as a resident.
Thank you, Shelley. Anybody else? Okay.
So I'm going to recommend that the board move into executive session regarding the ongoing dispute with concerning the defects in the roof at the new public safety facility and strategy for potential litigation with respect thereto. Executive session would be pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, subsection A, subsection 3. I would recommend that the board declare that the board will only be, first of all, that an open discussion of these matters would be adverse to the town's litigating strategy, and that the board will only be returning to regular session to adjourn the meeting.
I will entertain that motion I will make that motion by roll call vote.
Second.
All those in favor?
Guy Bradford, aye.
Ruth Perrine, aye. So we voted by roll call vote to come out of executive session. I will entertain a motion I will actually make a motion to go back into regular session.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I will I will make a motion to adjourn the Board of Selectmen meeting at 8:20 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nobody on?
Thank you, Alec. Have a great night. No, but we're